Well, Talk to Me succeeds in presenting graphic imagery that's gonna potentially shock you and definitely is well fit for the horror genre. When it comes to actually caring about the characters involved, or even to a point the story that the movie has, let's just say it doesn't keep up with the graphic imagery. To summarize the film, it has been about 2 years since Mia's mother Ria has died, and since then, her and her father Max haven't necessarily bonded over their grief. Instead, Mia has decided to really kind of latch onto her best friend Jade, Jade's mother, whose name is Sue, as well as grow closer to Jade's little brother Riley. However, as time has gone on, certain people are starting to recognize that Mia is a little bit too much of a latch, or even a leech, and it's starting to bug a few people. For example, a person named Haley, she's not all that fond of Mia, but things take a bit of a turn as Mia decides to join in this local weird thing that's going on when it comes to touching what is supposedly a dead medium's hand, saying talk to me, and then after seeing some type of supernatural being, saying let me in. This leads to a bunch of crazy supernatural things happening, and at first it's just a game. Almost everybody does it, see these creepy features, very weird things happen when people get possessed, but then there's a shift. Ria talks to Mia through one of the people who are playing the game, and with that comes a lot of stuff that leads to for some it's a slow decline, others a quick decline, and it leads you to wonder, when all is said and done, is who's going to survive, since it's very much clear that these possessions, these demons, they're taking somebody with them. The question is only, who's it going to be? As for what is Talk to Me rated and why, it is rated R, and that's because there's a moderate amount of cursing and some suggestive dialogue. There's blood, there's decay, scarred, and also mutilated bodies, and also there's multiple depictions of murder. In terms of sexual content, there's some suggestive dialogue in some ways, but pretty much outside of watching one character suck another character's foot, it's pretty tame sexual-wise. As for miscellaneous stuff, there's drinking and also there's smoking. Switching to the review section, the sole highlight, unfortunately, is just the violence and imagery. Within the first 5 minutes, you see someone violently break down a door, see someone's body that's covered in scars and markings, and said person stabs somebody and then just stabs himself right in the head with a knife. That sets the tone and also should set your expectations for what's happening in this film, because that is what Talk to Me is really trying to give you here. Violent, graphic imagery that could potentially leave a mark on your brain. And that is pretty much the main reason why this is rated R, and probably the main selling point if you ask me. Going into the on the fence topic, the issue for me is that I'm someone who likes character-driven stories. Stories that really get you invested in a character, whether something good happens to them, bad happens to them, they're characters you simply just want to love, or characters you love to hate. Talk to Me doesn't provide that. Talk to Me is a moments-driven type of story where it's about setting up different things to lead the audience to be in shock or in awe of what's happening on screen. So when it comes to developing the characters, world building, or even just establishing a good enough story to set up these moments, like a lot of horror movies and also action movies, that's not necessarily the priority here. Like, as established when it comes to Mia, a lot of what's gone into when it comes to her is just to get that quick sympathy. They note that her mother's dead and it's been 2 years. They make it very much clear that she's latched on to Jade. Never mind, with Jade starting to date Daniel, now she's starting to feel Jade become distant. So she tries to insert herself into the situation, and while she does mention, yeah, me and Daniel dated back in the day, probably when they was in middle school, she's trying to play down any type of connection they may still have that's residual. It's a lot of teen drama, and then when you throw in her father and that relationship, because they don't really give the father any scenes and he doesn't really get established much past beyond being Mia's father and Mia's husband, a lot of the emotional connection or even like emotional relationships that they could have built is just not there. And then when you go beyond Mia's story and you talk about Haley and Joss, who are the ones who host these parties with the medium's hand, we don't learn really much about them at all. We learn that Joss inherited the hand. We know that Haley's a new kid, but beyond that, nothing. And it's an issue for me because when things start to happen to characters without that emotional connection, I couldn't give a damn what happens to this person or that person. I'm focused on, can they keep escalating the visuals? Can they keep escalating how dramatic or crazy things get? And if it doesn't have the ability to keep upping the ante, and you don't have this backup of being invested in the characters, or at least wanted to know how the story plays out, it makes it so after a certain point it's easy to get bored, especially if you're someone like me who's watched many horror movies, including foreign horror movies, where they take things far beyond whatever American, or in this case Australian, films have done. Because after seeing The World of Kanako, and then this German feature where things were just utterly disgusting, honestly, you really have to do the most. And I'll even throw in the original Martyrs, where you see someone get their skin peeled off. Once you see stuff like that, seeing things like What You Get in Talk to Me, it's cool and all, but it really doesn't hit you to the point of, beyond the occasional jump scare because they made a loud noise or anything, it doesn't really hit you like it needs to for you to really feel entertained and satisfied. Overall, when it comes to Talk to Me, yes, if you are just in it for the violence and graphic imagery, this is worth seeing. But if you need something more than that, if you need an emotional connection to characters, if you need a story that really keeps you engaged, this doesn't provide it. Characters don't get enough development, either on their own or regarding their relationship with each other, for you to really become invested and even potentially care about who lives or dies. Story-wise, it's one of those, it's good enough to set up the moments, but on its own, there isn't really much of a story. Mia's trying to find out what happened to my mom, especially after she believes that she talked to the ghost of her mom. That's pretty much it. And yes, things happen, but again, those moments eclipse anything that's going on with Mia's journey, Mia's character, or any character. And in some ways it feels like wasted potential, but at the same time, how many horror movies really are trying to balance giving us the well-developed characters, an intriguing story, and on top of that, give us the type of violence, jump scares, and just horrifying moments and imagery that really rock us to our core.